My wife looked me straight in the eye and said she wanted the mansion, the car collection, everything, except our son. I smiled and said, "You can have it all." That morning in Malibu tasted of sea salt and the expensive Chanel perfume Veronica wore. It was not pure. It was heavy and suffocating, like a scent trying to cover up a decaying corpse. I sat silently at the head of the glossy marble dining table. The sound of a dripping faucet echoed from the distant sink. Drop by drop, steady and cold. Veronica pushed a brown envelope across the table. The envelope bumped into my coffee cup. It felt as though the porcelain cup wanted to crack. The black liquid spilled across the pristine white surface. It spread like a pool of black mud. She did not even look at the mess. She only looked at me with the eyes of a hawk that had spotted its prey. Those eyes were beautiful, but they were empty. She spoke in a flat tone, a voice refined through countless high society parties. "Sign here. Everything has already been divided. This mansion, 3 sports cars, the account in the Cayman Islands, a total of $100 million. All of it belongs to me. Welcome back to Dad's real-life revenge. Grab a drink, some snacks, make yourself comfortable, and remember the people in these stories had every opportunity to do the right thing, they simply chose not to." Leave a comment with the number 1 so we can continue the story, and hit subscribe. You're going to enjoy this one. I looked at the woman who had lived with me for 20 years. She covered herself in the most luxurious things money could buy, but her soul was torn apart. I asked gently, "What about Leo? Our son is only 16 years old." Veronica laughed. Her laughter was as sharp as a blade cutting through glass. She folded, "Too slow and too conservative. I'm about to start a new life. I can't bring a burden with me. An outdated ornament like him would ruin my plans. You raise him. I'll leave you the old Ford in the garage. That's more than enough for a loser." My chest tightened. A surge of anger ran down my spine. But my face did not change. A 70-year-old man does not get angry with his fists. He gets angry with silence. I looked deep into her lifeless eyes. Greed had blinded this woman. She thought she was the predator. She thought this old man was finished and powerless. I picked up the pen. My fingers trembled slightly. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew I was about to open Pandora's box. I signed my name on the bottom line. Each stroke was firm and deliberate. Veronica snatched the paper away the moment I lifted the pen. She checked the signature with a look of complete satisfaction. She had no idea. The price of greed is always paid in blood and bone. She had just signed her own sentence with her own hands. The dining room door closed. The sharp clicks of Veronica's high heels echoed across the stone floor. The sound gradually faded and disappeared behind the oak door. I remained seated there, staring at the pool of black coffee that had begun to form a film across the marble tabletop. A faint rustling sound came from the corner of the hallway. I turned my head. Leo was standing there. The boy was pressed against a marble statue. His face was pale. His 16-year-old lips trembled, unable to form words. His eyes had gone dark. Those were not tears of ordinary hurt feelings. It was the collapse of an entire world. The light in the eyes of a 16-year-old boy had gone out. The wound left by his mother's words did not bleed. It simply buried itself deep inside his heart. He had heard everything. He had heard the woman who gave birth to him call him a burden. He had heard her call him an outdated ornament. Leo walked toward me. His steps were heavy as if weighted down with lead. He looked at the divorce papers in my hand. His voice was hoarse. "Is Mom really leaving me, Dad? Am I worth less than this house? Am I worth less than those 3 cars? I stood up. I wrapped my arms around the shoulders of my trembling son. His chest rose and fell with choked sobs. I did not offer empty words of comfort. I did not tell him everything would be okay, because everything was very far from okay. Veronica's cruelty had gone beyond the limits of an ordinary divorce. She was not just taking property. She was trampling on my son's dignity and soul. I raised my aged hand and ran it through his hair. It felt exactly like my own hair when I was young. Calm. I whispered into his ear, "Look at me, Leo. Cry this last time. That woman chose money. She will have money, but she will lose everything that truly belongs to a human being." Leo looked up at me. The weakness in his eyes slowly disappeared. In its place came a frightening coldness. He had inherited my patience. He asked, "Are you going to let her win, Dad? Are you really going to sign?" I smiled. It was a smile without a trace of warmth. I looked out the window where the old Ford sat beneath the blazing Malibu sun. Beyond it stretched an endless beach lined with white sand dunes. The ocean roared like a wild beast chained in place. I spoke to Leo. My voice was low, but every word was clear. This is no longer a divorce, son. This is a war. She thinks this 70-year-old man is powerless. She thinks that pile of luxury bricks and stone is everything. But she is wrong. She chose the wrong deck of cards. And I am the dealer. I saw her ending the moment she put her signature on that paper. Many people are probably wondering why an experienced man would so easily walk away from a $100 million fortune. Am I simply too weak? Or am I hiding a trump card that could leave her penniless overnight? The answer lies in a secret phone call I am about to make right now. I led Leo out of the mansion without taking anything except the boy's old backpack. I climbed into the driver's seat of the aging Ford. The engine came to life with a rough, rattling growl. The sound felt completely out of place among the wealthy neighborhoods of Malibu. But it was the sound of freedom. I pulled an old flip phone from my jacket pocket. I dialed a number I had memorized for 25 years. The person on the other end answered after 3 rings. The voice of a middle-aged woman came through, serious and cold. "This is Harrison." It was Sarah, my personal attorney, the only person who knew what lay buried beneath the foundations of the Clark family. I got straight to the point. My voice was calm in a way that was almost frightening. Veronica signed the papers. She took everything. The house, the cars, the offshore accounts. The line fell silent for 3 seconds. I could hear the rustling of documents being turned. Sarah asked again, "Are you sure, Harrison, you're really letting her have that mansion? It's your life's work." I glanced at Leo. The boy was staring through the dusty car window. I answered Sarah. I agreed to all of her financial demands. No disputes, no lawsuits. But with one condition: she must sign away all parental rights. She will have no authority rights or claims regarding Leo from this moment forward. 2 hours later, we met at a small law office downtown. There were no crystal chandeliers, no marble floors, only towering stacks of files. Veronica arrived 15 minutes later. She was accompanied by her personal attorney, a man wearing a smug smile. She looked at me with contempt. Her eyes brushed over Leo as if he were an old piece of furniture abandoned on the side of the road. When Sarah slid the parental rights termination agreement across the table, Veronica did not even bother to read it carefully. She only focused on the line confirming ownership of the $100 million Malibu mansion. She signed with a quick stroke of the pen. Fast and decisive. She thought she had won big. She thought this old man had become sentimental and foolish, willing to walk away with nothing to protect his useless son. She smirked. "You really are a great father, Harrison. I wish the two of you happiness." She stood up and walked away. Proud as a queen who had just conquered a kingdom, she had no idea that she had just signed a contract with the devil. She could only see the tip of the iceberg. She was completely blind to what was coming. When the office door closed, Sarah looked at me. There was hesitation in her eyes. She asked, "Do we move on to the next step now?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Let her enjoy the luxury for a while. Let her move in and believe she owns the world. Veronica's blindness is my greatest weapon." But what was it that made a seasoned attorney like Sarah uneasy when she mentioned the next phase of the plan? What hidden provision was buried inside that parental rights termination agreement that Veronica never noticed? 3 days after signing the papers, Leo and I returned to the Malibu mansion to collect the last of our personal belongings. It was not a move. It was a public execution. Veronica stood in the grand foyer with her arms crossed. She watched us like a prison guard counting inmates. She had hired 3 large security guards to stand watch at the entrance. Every time Leo placed a book or a shirt into a cardboard box, she would step forward and inspect it. She was afraid we might secretly take something that belonged to her world of luxury. This woman's greed had stripped away the last traces of human decency. Leo walked toward the corner of the living room where a glossy black Steinway grand piano stood. It had belonged to his grandfather. It was the only thing connecting him to the warm memories of our family. He ran his fingers gently across the ivory keys. Then he looked up at Veronica. His voice was pleading. "Mom, can I take this piano with me? It belonged to Grandpa." Veronica walked over. She slapped Leo's hand away from the keys. A harsh note rang out from the piano, painful and sharp. She said coldly, "No, this piano is worth $200,000. It looks perfect in this room for entertaining my distinguished guests. Are you two planning to drag it into some slum? It doesn't belong there." Leo pressed his lips together. I saw his fingers digging into the hem of his shirt until his knuckles turned white. He did not cry. The spring of frustration inside the 16-year-old boy was compressed another notch. He turned away. He did not look at his mother again. I stood beside him and witnessed the entire humiliation. I remained silent. I did not argue with her over a piano. My silence only made Veronica more arrogant. She believed this old man had been completely broken. Leo and I carried the worn cardboard boxes out to the car. We walked beneath the blazing sun. Sweat soaked our clothes. Meanwhile, Veronica stepped onto the second-floor balcony of the mansion. A glass of red wine rested in her hand. She waved at us with a triumphant smile. Our battered old Ford slowly rolled out of the sunlit estate. Through the rearview mirror, I watched the Malibu mansion fade into the distance. Veronica was standing at the peak of wealth and luxury. She believed she had taken everything from my son and me. She believed she owned a paradise worth $100 million. But she had no idea that paradise had been built on quicksand, and this battered old Ford was carrying the only two people who possessed the key to destroying it. The real hell was waiting for us at our next apartment. Yet it was also the place where the fire of revenge would begin to burn. Would a shabby apartment be enough to break the spirit of a 16-year-old boy? Or would it drive a wedge between father and son that could never be repaired? Our new home was apartment 2B in a complex called the Palms. The name sounded impressive, but in reality it was an old run-down 3-story building tucked deep inside the city. There was no scent of expensive perfume, no Malibu ocean breeze. The place smelled only of damp, peeling walls and grease drifting from the cheap restaurants along the street. The atmosphere was gray and suffocating. Leo threw his backpack onto the wooden floor, which had already been eaten away by termites. The thud echoed through the room in lonely fashion. He looked around the apartment, which was less than 40 square meters in size. An old bed, a shaky table and chairs, and a tiny kitchen with a leaking faucet. The steady drip of water filled the silence. The sound was painful. It reminded us of the faucet in the luxurious mansion we had left behind. But now it was a symbol of poverty and defeat. Leo stood in the middle of the room. His shoulders trembled. The endurance of a 16-year-old boy had finally reached its limit. He turned toward me. His eyes were filled with anger and disappointment. He shouted, his voice breaking, "Why do we have to live here? Why did you let her take everything? You're Harrison Clark. You used to be the most powerful man around." I did not answer. I walked into the kitchen. From one of our bags, I pulled out an old wrench. I crouched down and began tightening the leaking faucet. I focused entirely on the task. One turn at a time, slow and patient, Leo stormed into the kitchen. He snatched the wrench from my hand and hurled it onto the floor. The sharp clang of metal against tile rang through the apartment. He stared directly into my eyes. Tears of frustration streamed down his face. "You're a coward. You're weak, and that's why you let her humiliate us. Did you hand everything over to her just to buy this pathetic piece? She called me a burden. She stole Grandpa's piano. And all you do is stay silent and fix this broken faucet." His words stabbed into me. Every sentence felt like a knife driven into my chest. But my face remained unchanged. The spring of frustration inside me was also being compressed to its limit. Yet I was a 70-year-old man. I knew how to control the fire burning within me. My silence was not surrender. It was the patience of a tiger stalking its prey. It was the calculation of a brilliant mind waiting for the perfect moment. I picked up the wrench. I looked directly into Leo's bloodshot eyes. I placed both hands on his shoulders. My voice was low but firm. "Look into my eyes, Leo. Do you think I'm a coward? Do you think I've given up? Remember this place. Remember this smell of damp walls and the sound of that dripping water. This is the price we must pay to gain complete freedom from her. I will never allow you to live in humiliation forever." Leo looked at me. The determination in my eyes seemed to calm him. He took a step back. He wiped away his tears and turned away. I bent down and continued repairing the faucet. At last the dripping stopped. The room fell back into a cold silence. I knew the pressure had become great enough. The spring had been compressed as far as it could go. Now it was time for me to go out and maintain the appearance of a defeated old man in front of people who had once known me. The next morning I put on the oldest suit I owned. The cuffs were worn and frayed. I drove the battered Ford to the Coastline Club. This place had once been my home. It was where I had directed major decisions and determined the fate of hundreds of projects. But today I arrived as a defeated man. I needed to maintain that image of failure perfectly. I sat alone at a small table tucked away in a corner. I ordered the cheapest black coffee on the menu. The waiter looked at me with sympathy. They all knew my story. Rumors about old Harrison Clark being thrown out by his younger wife with nothing to his name had spread throughout the city. Laughter suddenly erupted near the main entrance. I looked up. Veronica had arrived. She was dazzling in a bright red evening gown. Beside her walked a younger man with carefully styled glossy hair. He was her new lover, the man who would now enjoy my $100 million mansion alongside her. Veronica spotted me. A cruel excitement lit up her eyes. She grabbed her companion by the arm and walked directly toward my table. Standing over me with folded arms, she looked down as though I were some pitiful creature at the bottom of society. She spoke with mock sympathy. "Oh, look who it is. The great Harrison Clark. Why are you sitting in this dark corner? That suit is from the last century, isn't it?" The younger man chuckled. He pulled out a black credit card and tossed it onto my table with a sharp click. "Waiter," he said, "put the old man's coffee on my card. Consider it charity for the poor. We shouldn't let an elderly man go hungry on the streets." Veronica burst into laughter. The sound drew the attention of everyone nearby. People turned toward me with expressions of pity. The spring of frustration inside me tightened to its limit. The veins in my hands bulged beneath my skin, but I remained seated. I stared at the credit card on the table. Then I slowly lifted my eyes and looked directly at the two miserable people standing before me. It was the gaze of a true predator. I stood up. I did not take the card. I did not argue. I simply turned and walked away toward the parking lot. The humiliation had served its purpose. The performance of the defeated old man was over. Now it was time for the monster to wake up. I climbed into the old Ford and pulled out my phone. My hands were no longer trembling. They were as cold as ice. I dialed Arthur, the only truly loyal man I had left in the shadows. He answered immediately. "I'm listening, sir." I closed my eyes and drew a deep breath of the stale air inside the aging car. Then I gave the order. "Activate Project Phoenix. It's time." The line fell silent for a moment. Then Arthur answered without hesitation. "Understood, sir. Everything has been ready for 25 years. I ended the call. A deadly smile appeared on the face of a 70-year-old man. Veronica and her lover believed they had just trampled on me. They believed they had won. But they did not realize that their arrogance had just triggered the countdown on a time bomb that would blow their luxurious lives into pieces. If you've stayed with us this far, then this story has probably stirred something in you. Please take a quick moment to help us out, like and subscribe. Leave a comment with the number 5 so I know you've made it this far, and tell me your prediction for how the story ends. Let's see if you can guess correctly. Many people watch without doing that, but it costs you nothing and means a great deal to us. I drove back to apartment 2B. The anger from the confrontation at the Coastline Club had not clouded my judgment. It had distilled into a cold, precise form of energy. Leo was sitting at his desk. The moment he saw me, he noticed the change in my eyes. He could feel the atmosphere around me growing heavier. I sat down across from my son. Then I slid a dark blue folder, faded with age, across the table toward him. I said, "It's time for you to learn the truth about Project Phoenix." I began explaining a plan I had put in place 25 years earlier. long before I ever met Veronica. Back then, I was already a seasoned businessman. I understood how quickly people could change and how ruthless the business world could be. So I created an irrevocable trust. The trust was designed to protect my core assets for my only heir. That heir was you. I used technical terms, but I explained them in the simplest way possible. In the real estate world, there is a concept known as a ground lease. 25 years ago, I completely separated ownership of the house from ownership of the Malibu land beneath it. That luxurious mansion was nothing more than bricks and stone sitting on the surface. Leo's trust was the true and sole owner of the land underneath. I had buried a highly confidential provision inside the divorce structure that Veronica had just signed. I gave her every asset that was legally in my name. But that land had never belonged to me. It belonged to Leo. The ground lease between the landowner and the homeowner contained a special provision. It would terminate immediately if the house was transferred to someone who was not a blood relative of the Clark family. Veronica was not my blood relative. She received the house through the divorce. That meant the ground lease became void the moment she signed the papers. I looked at Leo. His mouth had fallen open in disbelief. The bitterness and resentment in his eyes vanished completely. In their place was profound admiration. He finally understood the chessboard I had set up decades earlier. I leaned back in my chair and looked toward the dust-covered window. My voice was as sharp as a razor. She owns the most expensive pile of bricks in the world, but she's standing on my son's land without paying a single cent. Right now, Veronica is inside that mansion. She's opening the most expensive bottles of wine she can find and celebrating a victory that doesn't exist. She has no idea that her house is hanging in midair. She has no right to walk across the lawn, no right to park on the driveway. She doesn't even have the right to bring that young lover of hers through the front gate. The hands of the clock slowly crept toward midnight. The hidden deadline within my plan was counting down second by second. Tonight would be the last night she slept peacefully. At 1 minute past midnight, a special gift from my law office would be delivered directly to Malibu. It was the one thing capable of turning her luxurious celebration into the most terrifying nightmare of her life. That night, the Malibu mansion blazed with the light of crystal chandeliers. Music thundered from a massive sound system. The pounding beats carried all the way to the shoreline, drowning out even the growl of the ocean waves beyond the beach. Veronica was hosting a lavish housewarming party. She had invited hundreds of guests to celebrate her victory, to show off how she had cast a 70-year-old man out of his own palace. She wore a dress that sparkled like diamonds. A glass of champagne rested in her hand as she drifted through the grand halls beside her young lover. Compliments and flattery followed her everywhere. People called her the new Queen of Malibu. The arrogance and greed of this woman had reached their peak. What she did not know was that a black car sat quietly in the shadows outside the estate gates. At exactly 12:01 in the morning, the music was suddenly interrupted by a rapid series of doorbell chimes. A security guard entered the main hall carrying a bright red envelope. He approached Veronica and spoke quietly into her ear. "Someone sent this for you. Urgent delivery." Veronica frowned. Annoyed at the interruption, she snatched the envelope from his hand. With the party at its height, she tore it open. Inside was an official court eviction notice. Attached was a detailed invoice signed by attorney Sarah. The bold headline struck her immediately. Notice of termination of land use rights and emergency eviction of improvements on the property. Demand for payment of outstanding ground lease fees at $60,000 per month. Veronica burst into laughter. The sound echoed awkwardly through the crowd, which had fallen silent. She held the papers high for everyone to see. "Look at this. My old ex-husband is playing childish games again. Does he really think this piece of trash paper can throw me out of my $100 million house? What a pathetic loser." Without hesitation, she tore the notice into pieces. The fragments fluttered through the air like cheap snowflakes. The guests cheered. The music resumed. The party continued in a frenzy of celebration. They all thought it was a joke, but they failed to notice the expression on the face of the young lover standing beside her. He was a gold digger. But he was not stupid. He had seen the bright red seal of the court printed on the shredded papers scattered across the floor. Quietly, he began backing away through the crowd. The feeling of a trap closing around a greedy person had started to emerge. Veronica continued drinking, but a crack of unease had appeared inside her. The next morning, the emergency court hearing would begin. She remained confident. She believed she had the best lawyers money could buy. She believed victory was guaranteed. What she did not know was that tomorrow's courtroom battle was not a place for debate. It was a legal guillotine I had spent 25 years sharpening. The courtroom of the Supreme Court was gray and cold. Rows of polished oak benches sat beneath dim light filtering through towering windows. The steady hum of ceiling fans overhead sent chilly currents drifting through the room. I sat on the left side of the courtroom. The face of a 70-year-old man revealed nothing. Leo sat beside me. He wore a formal suit. His eyes remained fixed straight ahead. The hesitation that had once defined him was completely gone. Across the aisle, Veronica entered like a queen. She wore the most expensive designer outfit she owned. The sharp clicks of her heels echoed across the stone floor. The sound rang through the courtroom like a challenge. Behind her followed a formidable legal team carrying polished leather briefcases. She glanced at me with contempt. Leaning toward her lead attorney, she whispered something and laughed smugly. She believed this was merely an annoying formality before she could finally send me off to a retirement home. What she failed to notice was that her young lover sat in the gallery behind her, drenched in sweat. His eyes darted nervously around the room. The crack of Judge Patterson's gavel echoed through the courtroom. Instant silence followed. Judge Patterson was a stern man with silver-white hair. Wearing reading glasses, he opened a thick, dark blue file and began turning its pages. It was the Project Phoenix file Sarah had submitted the previous afternoon. Veronica's attorney stood first. In a confident voice, he addressed the court. "Your Honor, my client is the sole lawful owner of the Malibu mansion. This fact is clearly established in the divorce agreement signed by Mr. Harrison Clark. Mr. Clark's attempt to issue an eviction notice and demand land lease payments is completely baseless and constitutes harassment. We respectfully request that the court dismiss this matter immediately and order Mr. Clark to compensate my client for emotional damages." Veronica smiled with satisfaction. She casually adjusted her hair and waited for the court's decision. Judge Patterson did not look at the attorney. Instead, he continued studying the file in front of him. His brow tightened. He turned to page 12. There, stamped in bright red, was the documentation for the irrevocable trust established for Leo Clark. The judge looked up. His sharp gaze settled on Veronica. Then he turned toward Sarah. Sarah rose calmly. Opening her briefcase, she removed 2 original documents. Her voice was clear and precise. Every word struck with authority. "Your Honor, my client does not dispute Mrs. Veronica's ownership of the house. We gave it to her. However, we are requesting that the court enforce the rights of the landowner. Under state law, and pursuant to the trust agreement, established 25 years ago, all land beneath the mansion is the inviolable property of Leo Clark." The courtroom fell silent. Veronica's confident smile froze on her face. For the first time since this battle began, uncertainty flashed across her eyes. The game she thought she understood had suddenly changed, and she had just realized she had never been playing on the real board at all. Sarah handed the documents to the court clerk. She continued, "The ground lease agreement between the landowner and the homeowner clearly states that the lease automatically terminates without notice if the property built on the land is transferred to someone who is not a blood member of the Clark family. Mrs. Veronica received the house through the divorce. She is not a blood relative of our family. Therefore, as of 12:01 this morning, she has been occupying Leo Clark's land unlawfully." Veronica's expression changed instantly. The smile on her lips froze. She sprang to her feet. "That's a lie. The house is mine. The land should be mine too. He gave me everything." Judge Patterson slammed his gavel onto the bench. "Order in the court, Mrs. Clark." I slowly rose to my feet. I buttoned my worn suit jacket and stepped toward the front of the courtroom. Then I looked directly into the face of the terrified woman before me. My voice was low, cold as ice. "You never fooled me, Veronica. I gave you exactly what you asked for. You simply forgot to ask who owned the ground beneath your feet." Judge Patterson removed his glasses. He looked at Veronica and delivered the ruling. "The court recognizes ownership of the land as belonging to the Leo Clark Trust. The ground lease has been terminated. Mrs. Veronica Clark has two options. First, she may remove the entire $100 million mansion and return the land to its original condition within 30 days. Second, she may remain on the property and pay land lease fees to Leo Clark at a rate of $60,000 per month. In addition, outstanding taxes and late payment penalties totaling $500,000 are due immediately. The entire courtroom erupted into murmurs. Veronica collapsed back into her leather chair. The color drained completely from her face. She spun around and looked toward the gallery behind her, searching for her young lover. But the seat was empty. He had quietly slipped out through a rear exit the moment he heard the words $500,000 in penalties. He had run. The self-proclaimed Queen of Malibu had been abandoned to face the collapse of her kingdom alone. She was ruined. Her $100 million mansion had become nothing more than a massive debt trap. She stared at me with wild eyes. Eyes filled with hatred and helplessness. The legal battle was over. My son and I had won completely. But the story did not end there. As we walked out of the courthouse, a police vehicle was already waiting outside. The officers were not there to protect Veronica. They were there because of another confidential envelope of documents I had delivered to federal investigators earlier that morning. Veronica never made it off the courthouse steps. Two federal agents were already waiting. They presented an emergency arrest warrant for tax fraud and the illegal transfer of assets through Cayman Islands accounts. The documents Arthur had gathered over many years had finally served their purpose. She screamed in desperation. The sharp heels that had once echoed with confidence now dragged across the cold stone pavement. She was escorted into a transport vehicle. The vehicle pulled away, leaving a trail of gray exhaust drifting through the city. That evening, Leo and I returned to apartment 2B. I did not rush back to Malibu. This place was small, but it was peaceful. The dripping faucet had fallen completely silent. In its place was the aroma of two hot pizzas resting on the old wooden table. Leo looked at me. There was no resentment or anger left in him. He smiled softly and pushed a slice toward me. He had grown up overnight. He had learned the power of patience. We ate our pizza in silence. But it was the silence of victors, the silence of people who truly controlled their future. I looked at my son and leaned back in my chair. My life had weathered 70 years of storms, and I had learned one unchanging truth. Greedy people chase the shine of wealth. Wise people control the foundation beneath their feet. Silence is strength. Never mistake a father's patience for weakness. True power is not found in shouting or in displays of luxury. It is found in a calm mind and a heart willing to protect what matters most. Thank you for joining us on Dad's Real Life Revenge. Don't forget to share your own story in the comments and subscribe so you won't miss the next hard-earned lesson. We'll see you in the next video. Veronica had every opportunity to be a mother, every opportunity to be a good wife. But greed blinded her. She chose a pile of lifeless bricks, and she paid for that choice with the freedom of the rest of her life. The court's sentence was only part of her punishment. The greatest sentence of all was loneliness.